Okay, so it's 5:35. We're going to call this meeting of the General Government Committee to order. We're joined by my colleague on the committee, Councilor Edwards, as well as my colleagues on the council, Council President Letterman, Councilor Davila, Councilor Perez, Councilor Govan, and Attorney Ken Shea, counsel to the City Council. A lot of councils. And then I think the only other people we've got Paul from WAMC. Hi, Paul. Okay, so the only item on the agenda for tonight is an item that we covered at our last General Government Committee meeting, which is the remote participation policy. At the last regular meeting of the council, there was some discussion about components of this plan, and pursuant to those discussions, the council president has proposed some adjustments. And I think, Mr. President, that you would like the floor to address those in hopes that we can move this forward tonight.
Thank you, Chairman Fenton, and to the members that are present here this afternoon. As the chairman alluded to, we took the feedback that was received at our meeting last week relative to the proposed remote participation policy and made some changes. If you'll have a chance to open the policy that was sent out by our staff earlier today with some of the proposed amendments, you'll see at the top there are just some minor changes to dates to bring it in line with the appropriate dates on which things have occurred or are anticipated to occur. So that's fairly straightforward. But the meat of the revisions are relative to eliminating a couple of sections that were beyond what the bare text of the state policy requires. Primarily, the definition of unreasonably difficult participation in person has been eliminated to allow essentially for it to stand on its basis, which is that the state open meeting law requires individuals to appear in person unless their participation in person could be deemed unreasonably difficult. In this section of the policy, the counselor certainly would have the opportunity to determine that their situation was unreasonably difficult and request then to participate virtually. I say request because request is the language that is used in the open meeting law at the state level. However, we have also eliminated the necessity of the chair to rule on the request. Essentially, instead, it is requiring that counselors in compliance with state law file a notification of their request to the city clerk, who shall record the request and ensure that the council president is aware, and then that will stay recorded should it ever be subject to an open meeting law request for the reason upon which somebody participated remotely. And then beyond that, we've added a brand new section at the bottom, which will govern remote participation under the act that extended certain COVID-19 measures. And this is probably what's really key. So to be clear, this policy and the intent of this policy was to make sure we were prepared when the open meeting law came back into full effect. But we also know that the open meeting law provisions allowing for hybrid and fully virtual meetings were extended. They were extended by the legislature just a day before our last meeting occurred. And so there are certain provisions of the open meeting law and remote participation, including this policy, that will be suspended between now and March 31st, 2023. Primarily, those are spelled out here, which is to say that essentially between now and March 31st, 2023, counselors would have the option to participate remotely at their discretion. That is allowable under the extension. The provisions that a quorum of the city council be physically present at the meeting location is suspended by state law currently through March 31st, 2023. This will also put in place, codify that subcommittee chairs may convene fully remote subcommittee meetings at their discretion. And I suspect that for the time being, most subcommittee meetings will be remote. so that we have time to get the committee room ready for hybrid participation. And then also, again, codifying that the president of the council will monitor public health conditions and that we may still in the future have a situation that requires us to either go fully remote or to provide alternative access for viewing meetings in compliance with that law and in consultation with the Springfield Commissioner of Health and Human Services. And so those are the primary changes that were all highlighted in the draft that was sent out. I'm hopeful that this will address some of the concerns that were raised at our last meeting and more fully capture the spirit and intent of the remote participation policy, both between now and March 31st, 2023, as well as once we enter the open meeting law being back in full effect. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And so Jesse, just so that Mr. President, so I have it right, we, for the last 2 years, we're operating under a special act passed by the Massachusetts General Court that allowed us to meet completely remotely in the interest of public safety and transparency. And then that law was set to expire on or about July 15th. And so as a result of that pending expiration, the hybrid meeting that you called last week was designed in the way that it was, and the policy was proposed that way. Subsequent to those accommodations, the legislature extended that special act through March 31st of 23. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. But nevertheless, you're proposing a policy that would allow us to be prepared for that date and also to have accommodations for what to do in the meantime.
That is correct. And I will say, I also had a chance relative to kind of what other folks are doing. I did have a chance to speak with our colleagues in Chicopee and in Holyoke. And this is the model that they have actually been operating under what is proposed currently between now and March 31st for some months, which is essentially a hybrid opportunity that allows individuals to attend in person or via Zoom or remote as needed. And it's worked out pretty well for them. They haven't had a large amount of complaints. In those communities, it seems that most counselors have chosen to participate in person. Others have chosen to participate remotely, but it's run pretty smooth. And so I think that should serve us well as in the same vein.
All right, and then last point, and then I'll just see if anybody has any other questions. So tonight, pursuant to the extension of that special act, we'll meet exclusively remote. And then at our next available meeting, which would be on August, when is it?
August 22nd.
Yeah, August 22nd, that meeting, your intent is that you would be in person and that counselors would be able to attend in person or electronically.
That is correct. That was always the intent, was to return for the August 22nd meeting for a couple of reasons. Number one, we did know that this law was beginning to expire. Number two, we also want to get back to our traditional hearing process, which is both more affordable for applicants and allows them to move through the permitting process with a little bit less red tape, the opportunity for us to vote on permits that night, as well as it being just before the kind of reconvening of our formal fall session. So give us a chance to get back there. Again, the necessity of last Monday was by fact that the law had not been extended, and we felt it was important to make sure the business of the council was conducted. And I appreciate all of my colleagues who worked to make sure that we did have that opportunity. With that said, I think August 22nd is a good date, and I've spoken with focus relative to making sure that we would be prepared for that meeting, which I have been assured that we will be, and also. For tonight, it being a special meeting, we felt it was appropriate to convene it remotely since August 22nd was the original date we had set.
I have a couple other questions, but I don't want to monopolize the time. So do any other counselors have any questions? Counselor Govan?
Yes, I'm not sure if everyone saw the email response that I sent back after I reviewed the changes that were made to the ordinance or the resolution, but I was hoping, and I don't know if this is possible, if it would be possible to request that all city councilors, if we are remote for the foreseeable future, at least until March 2023, if we could have our cameras turned on, because I think it's important for us to, let the public know who we are, who's talking, who's speaking. And of course, the nonverbal communication that gets lost when we don't see each other's beautiful faces. My only comment. Thank you.
Councilor Davila?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, thank you for your work on this. If you allow me, Councilor and Attorney Kensha, it's good to see you, sir. I'm glad to see you back in the City Council. Mr. President, if I may, just to be clear, so we are going to operate on a hybrid model. I think I understand this. It's going to be crystal clear. We're going to be operating through a hybrid model through March of next year, correct?
Correct.
And the councilor can choose whether to participate physically or remotely. And it doesn't, they don't require a quorum until March, correct? To be physically present.
Correct.
This is going to go into effect in March then, this proposal?
Correct. So the other provisions that are required by state law, this is essentially lifted directly from state law and what it says about remote participation in the open meeting law, those will come into effect fully March 31st, 2023, unless it was extended again, which I did put in the policy. I essentially put in the policy that it would be accepted either March 31st, 2023, or whenever that act expires, whatever comes last.
Okay, I see. Now, it says here that section 6, I think 6C, am I reading that we could do remote subcommittee meetings?
Correct. So something that that I had mentioned in the last meeting, and that I definitely heard from counselors in the feedback is, many of us see an inherent benefit in the virtual subcommittee meetings because, they allow for us to convene committees on a more regular basis. They allow for us to grant larger access to folks. And so something that does occur via the extension of the open meeting law emergency provisions is that we could continue to convene fully remote subcommittee meetings. And I think that at the chair's discretion, that's appropriate. Once we have the committee room outfitted for hybrid participation, a committee chair certainly could also choose to hold a meeting in the committee room and then provide a Zoom link on top of that. That will not be possible. A hybrid committee meeting at this time wouldn't be possible yet until that equipment comes in, which will be mid-September. We'll be ready in the chamber, but we won't be ready in the committee room.
Right. As I mentioned before, Mr. President, that one of the things that excites me about this possibility is that we're going to continue to extend better access and to make it easier for the residents to participate in their government and to keep track as to what's happening in their government. So those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Davila, and thank you for all your feedback.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, Jesse, my just last two questions are, is it your intent that we'll be back in the full council chamber in August? And do you think we'll be technically in a position to do that?
Yes. So I spoke with Focus Springfield today. Everything has been ordered for full accommodation of hybrid meetings, which again, I think is going to be a great piece of progress for local government in Springfield to have the chamber, the committee room, and several other rooms at Springfield City Hall outfitted for this type of hybrid participation, unprecedented in terms of access for residents and to make sure that government is able to continue in almost any circumstance. However, like everything right now, much of that equipment is back ordered. And so we expect to have it start to come in September. But until then, Focus Springfield has been committed and kind enough to bringing equipment over from their location for our chamber meetings, and they will be able to accommodate us virtually and in person for the August 22nd meeting. It'll be a little bit of work on their part, which we're very grateful to them for the accommodation. Certainly they have to transport equipment to City Hall and allow us to essentially borrow it until our equipment fully is delivered. But we will be able to hold a hybrid meeting on August 22nd. Once we are fully in person, it will be a little bit more built out. We'll be able to have more screens and all of that. But in the meantime, we will be set up for August 22nd.
And the committee, I think I heard you say the committee room you hope will also be outfitted that way. So if a committee chair wants to call a meeting and chair it in person, they would do it in the committee room. And when do you think that would first, like, when do you estimate we'd first start to be able to do that?
Focus today estimated that would not be possible until mid-September.
Okay. All right.
And they will be training us and our staff in City Hall for operation of that hybrid system, because they will be available obviously for our full meetings to control everything in that regard. But the committee room setup will be a little simpler. And so they're going to train both the administrative staff in the city council office as well as any counselors that are comfortable with it so that we can basically operate that equipment as needed for our hybrid committee meetings.
That's all I have. Any other counselors? Okay. Do we have a motion to make a positive recommendation for this policy tonight?
Motion to make a positive recommendation to the committee of the whole.
Okay, and I will second that. All those in favor, Counselor Edwards?
Aye.
I'm also an aye, so that's enough. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you at 7 o'clock.